The package felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in Victor Benson's trembling hands, though it couldn't have been more than 2. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stood in the service elevator, watching the floor numbers climb. 12, 13, 14. Each ding was a countdown to something he couldn't take back. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting shadows across his dark skin, now slick with cold sweat despite the air conditioning. His fingers tightened around the unmarked brown envelope. He knew what was inside. He'd known for 3 months now, ever since the night Mary Dawson had called him into her office and transformed his life from difficult to impossible. The elevator jerked to a stop on the 17th floor. The doors slid open with a soft whisper, revealing the plush carpeted hallway of the Grandeur Hotel's executive suites. Victor's legs felt like lead as he stepped out, the envelope burning in his hands like evidence of a crime he was still committing. Because that's exactly what it was. Evidence. Crime. And he was the delivery boy who couldn't say no. 6 months ago, Victor had been just another immigrant chasing the American dream in Chicago, working double shifts to make ends meet, sending money back home to Lagos, trying to build something resembling a future. Then his mother collapsed during a video call, her face going slack, her words slurring into nothing. The diagnosis came fast and brutal. Stroke. Followed by complications. Followed by medical bills that turned into a mountain he could never climb. His tourist visa didn't give him access to affordable health care. His savings evaporated in 3 weeks. The hospital threatened to discharge her to a facility that was barely better than letting her die at home. That's when Mary Dawson found him crying in the hotel's storage room, surrounded by cases of imported wine that cost more than his monthly rent. She was the owner of the Grandeur, a woman who wore power like expensive perfume, sharp-featured and cold-eyed, with blonde hair always pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her face into a permanent expression of controlled displeasure. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered money. A private loan, she called it. No banks, no questions, no insurance companies to deny claims. Just cash, delivered quickly, enough to move his mother to a private facility where they actually cared whether patients lived or died. Victor had signed the papers without reading them. Desperation made you stupid. Hope made you blind. He'd learned that too late. The loan came with interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. But more than that, it came with expectations. Special tasks, Mary called them. Accommodations for certain guests. Deliveries that needed to be made with absolute discretion. The first time she explained what she wanted, Victor had refused. He'd stood in her office, that pristine space of marble and glass overlooking Michigan Avenue, and said no. He remembered the way she'd smiled, cold and patient, like a teacher explaining basic math to a slow student. The full payment on your loan is due in 72 hours, Victor, she'd said, sliding a document across her desk. As per Section 7, subsection C, which you signed. I can extend that deadline indefinitely, or I can enforce it. Your choice. He'd read the number. $83,000. Due immediately. Money he didn't have. Money he'd never have. Of course, there's also the matter of your visa status, she'd continued, examining her manicured nails. Tourist visa, 6 months expired. I'd hate for immigration enforcement to receive an anonymous tip about an undocumented worker at this hotel. Especially one whose mother is currently receiving expensive medical care. I imagine they'd deport her too. Back to Lagos. I hear the hospitals there are quite overwhelmed. That's how it started. 3 months ago. With a threat and a package, and the death of whatever naive hope Victor had carried with him to America. Now he stood outside room 1724, the envelope in his hand containing God knows what. Drugs, probably. Maybe documents. Maybe something worse. He didn't ask anymore. Asking made it real. Asking made him complicit in a way that willful ignorance somehow didn't, though he knew that was a lie he told himself to sleep at night. He knocked. 3 times. The signal Mary had taught him. The door opened to reveal a man with dead eyes and a neck tattoo that disappeared under his collar. He took the envelope without a word, without looking at Victor's face, and shut the door. The transaction took 5 seconds. Victor stood there for a moment longer, waiting for police to burst from the stairwell, for something to finally end this nightmare. Nothing happened. It never did. He made it back to the service elevator before his hands started shaking so badly he had to lean against the wall. The hotel's security cameras watched him from their discreet corners. He wondered if they recorded everything. If somewhere there was evidence of every delivery, every crime, every moment of his transformation from victim to accomplice. The elevator descended, and so did Victor's stomach. Floor by floor, back to the restaurant level where his real shift was about to start. Because the deliveries weren't instead of his regular job. They were in addition to it. Mary had made sure of that. If you're watching this story unfold, and you want to see how Victor's nightmare ends, make sure to hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The restaurant at the Grandeur Hotel was the kind of place where entrees cost more than Victor used to make in a week. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, a wine list that read like a European geography textbook. Victor had worked there for 2 years before everything went wrong. Back when he'd been proud of the job, when he'd thought maybe he could work his way up to restaurant manager, maybe even save enough to bring his mother over legally properly. Now the restaurant felt like a stage where he performed the role of a person who wasn't dying inside. "Table 6 needs water," snapped Andrea, the floor manager, a woman who'd always treated him with barely concealed contempt. "And you're 3 minutes late clocking in." Again. Victor glanced at the clock. 7:03. His shift started at 7. He'd been making a delivery for the woman who owned the building. But he couldn't say that. He could never say that. "Sorry," he muttered, grabbing a water pitcher. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Benson. Some of us actually care about our jobs." He bit back the response that burned in his throat. Andrea didn't know. None of them knew. They saw him as lazy, unreliable, always exhausted and distracted. They didn't see the 16-hour days. The deliveries that came at random hours. The constant fear that today would be the day it all fell apart. Let them think he was a bad employee. It was easier than the truth. The dinner service blurred together in a haze of forced smiles and mechanical movements. Victor poured wine, recited specials, cleared plates. His body went through the motions while his mind circled the same desperate thoughts it had circled for 3 months. There had to be a way out. There had to be something he could do. Go to the police? And tell them what? That he'd been making illegal deliveries for months? That he was an undocumented immigrant who'd signed a fraudulent loan? They'd arrest him before they even looked at Mary. Run. With what money? And abandon his mother? Every escape route ended in a wall. "Victor." Mary's voice cut through the dinner noise like a knife. She stood at the entrance to the private dining rooms, her expression pleasant for the benefit of nearby guests, but her eyes were cold. "A word, please." His blood turned to ice. She never approached him during regular service. Whatever this was, it wasn't routine. He followed her through the swinging doors into the kitchen, past the line cooks too busy to notice, into the narrow hallway that led to the loading docks. She didn't speak until they were alone in the concrete-walled space that smelled of garbage and old grease. "There's a situation," she said, pulling out her phone and showing him an address. "You need to make a delivery tonight. Midnight. This location." Victor stared at the screen. The address was in Englewood, one of Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods. The kind of place where tourist guidebooks told you never to go. Where even cops were careful. "I have to work until 11, he said carefully. "The restaurant. You'll leave at 11:30. Tell Andrea you're sick. I'll smooth it over. Ms. Dawson, that neighborhood, is not your concern." Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt louder than a shout. "Your concern is your mother's continued care at Sunrise Memorial. Your concern is not spending the next 5 years in prison for fraud and theft. Your concern is doing exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, without question." Am I being unclear? Victor's jaw tightened. 3 months of rage, fear, and helplessness crystallized into a single moment of clarity. He was tired. Tired of being afraid. Tired of being controlled. Tired of betraying everything he'd been raised to believe about right and wrong. "What if I say no?" The words came out before he could stop them. Mary's smile was the most terrifying thing he'd ever seen. It was patient, understanding, almost kind. "Then tomorrow morning, your mother wakes up in County General with a notice that her care has been terminated due to non-payment. By tomorrow afternoon, ICE has your name and address. By tomorrow evening, you're in a detention center awaiting deportation, and your mother is on a plane back to Lagos with a medical condition that requires care she'll never receive there. By next week, you're both gone, and I'm exactly where I am now, except I'll have found someone else to make my deliveries." She stepped closer. Victor could smell her perfume, something expensive and suffocating. "You're not special, Victor. You're not important. You're convenient. The moment you stop being convenient, you become a problem. And I solve problems very efficiently. So I'll ask again. Midnight. This address. Will there be an issue? Every muscle in Victor's body wanted to lunge at her, to scream, to do something, anything, to make her feel a fraction of the fear and helplessness she'd inflicted on him. But he stood frozen, trapped by the same invisible chains that had held him for 3 months. No issue, he heard himself say. Good. Mary's smile widened. The package will be in your locker. Don't open it. Don't ask questions. Just deliver it, get the signature, come back. Simple. She walked away, heels clicking on concrete, leaving Victor alone in the hallway that suddenly felt like a tomb. His hands were shaking again. His vision blurred. For the first time since this nightmare began, Victor felt something crack inside him. Some fundamental part of his spirit that had been holding on, insisting this was temporary, that he could survive this, just splintered. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold floor, his head in his hands. He thought about his mother, laughing at something stupid he'd said during their last video call. Her smile bright despite the hospital gown and the 4 in her arm. She was getting better. The doctors said she might even be able to come home soon, to the small apartment Victor had rented near the facility. She didn't know what it cost. She didn't know what he'd become. A door slammed somewhere in the building, making Victor jump. He checked his watch. 8:15. 3 hours and 45 minutes until he had to walk into a nightmare. He pulled himself to his feet, wiped his face, and headed back to the restaurant. The show had to go on. The smile had to stay in place. The perfect waiter, the compliant criminal, the dying man pretending to be alive. If this story is hitting you hard, drop a comment below telling me what you'd do in Victor's situation. Would you run? Fight back? And don't forget to like this video. It helps more people find these stories. The rest of the dinner service crawled by with agonizing slowness. Victor moved through it like a ghost, present but not really there. He messed up orders. Spilled wine on table 12's tablecloth. Dropped a tray of glasses in the kitchen, the crash making everyone stop and stare. Andrea pulled him aside with barely restrained fury. What is wrong with you tonight? You're a disaster. I'm sorry. I don't feel well. Then go home. We don't need sick people contaminating the food. Any other night, he would have protested, afraid of losing hours, losing pay. Tonight, he almost laughed at the irony. She thought she was punishing him. She didn't know she was giving him permission to walk into something far worse. Thank you, he said quietly. I'll go. He clocked out at 11:25, 5 minutes ahead of schedule. The locker room was empty, the other staff still finishing their shifts. Victor opened his locker with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Inside, sitting on top of his street clothes, was a package. Bigger than the others. Heavier. Wrapped in brown paper and sealed with tape that looked industrial, professional. Don't open it, Mary had said. As if not seeing the crime made him less guilty. As if ignorance was a shield. Victor stared at the package for a long moment, then carefully lifted it out. It felt dense, solid. Not drugs, then. Something else. Documents? Money. Weapons. His imagination supplied a dozen illegal possibilities, each worse than the last. He slid it into his backpack, the weight of it settling against his spine like a tumor. The address Mary had given him was burned into his memory. 4300 South Ashland. A warehouse district where businesses went to die. Where people went to disappear. Victor had looked it up on his phone during a brief break, had seen the street view images of abandoned buildings and chain-link fences, the kind of urban decay that happened when a city gave up on a neighborhood. He left through the employee entrance, stepping out into Chicago's November cold. The air bit at his face, carrying the smell of approaching snow. His car, a 15-year-old Honda with a broken heater and 200,000 miles, sat in the far corner of the staff parking lot. He bought it for $800 6 months ago, back when his biggest problem was transportation. Now it felt like a getaway vehicle for crimes he hadn't chosen to commit. The drive south took 40 minutes through streets that grew progressively darker, emptier, more hostile. Victor's GPS led him away from the gleaming towers of downtown, past residential neighborhoods where people still tried to maintain some dignity, into areas where hope had moved out and despair had moved in. Boarded-up storefronts. Vacant lots filled with trash. Buildings with windows like missing teeth. He pulled onto South Ashland, his headlights cutting through darkness that seemed thicker here, more oppressive. The warehouse appeared on his right, exactly where the GPS said it would be. A hulking brick structure with most of its windows broken, graffiti covering the lower walls, a chain-link fence that had been cut open in multiple places. No lights. No signs of life. Just darkness and the kind of silence that felt dangerous. Victor parked across the street, his engine ticking as it cooled. The package sat in his passenger seat, waiting. His phone showed 11:58. 2 minutes until midnight. 2 minutes until he had to get out of this car and walk into that building and complete whatever transaction Mary had arranged. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles ached. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. The location, the timing, the weight of the package. This wasn't a routine delivery. This was something bigger, something that crossed a line even Mary's previous crimes hadn't approached. What if it was a setup? What if the police were waiting inside? What if Mary had decided he'd become too much of a liability, and this was how she disposed of him? What if? His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're late. Get inside. North entrance. 3rd floor. Don't keep them waiting. Victor's breath came in short, sharp gasps. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. He was having a panic attack, he realized distantly. His body's last desperate attempt to stop him from doing this. But panic attacks didn't change reality. They didn't pay medical bills, or prevent deportations, or save his mother's life. He grabbed the package, got out of the car, and started walking toward the warehouse. Every step felt like wading through concrete. The November wind cut through his jacket, but he barely felt it. All his senses were focused on the building ahead, that dark maw of broken windows and shadows. The north entrance was a loading dock with a rusted metal door hanging half open. Victor slipped inside, his phone's flashlight the only illumination in the absolute darkness. The warehouse smelled of mold, rot, and something chemical he couldn't identify. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. His footsteps echoed on concrete floors littered with debris. He found the stairs, metal and creaking with every step. 2nd floor. 3rd floor. A hallway stretched ahead, doors on either side, all closed except one at the far end where a faint light spilled out. Victor walked toward it, the package clutched to his chest now like a shield that couldn't protect him from anything. He reached the doorway and looked inside. The room beyond was lit by a single camping lantern sitting on an old desk. 2 men stood in the shadows, their faces hidden. One of them stepped forward as Victor entered. You're the delivery? The voice was rough, impatient. Yes, Victor managed. You're late. Traffic. I don't care. Give me the package. Where's the other thing? Victor's mind went blank. What other thing? The man's posture changed, tension flooding his body. Don't play games. Mary said there'd be 2 packages. Where's the second one? I only have one. She only gave me one. The 2 men exchanged a look Victor couldn't decipher in the dim light. The second man pulled out a phone, dialing quickly. A terse conversation in whispers. Then he hung up and looked at Victor with eyes that reflected the lantern light like a predator's. She set you up, delivery boy. This is a short package. You're holding half a payment, which means you just made us look like we're trying to rip off some very dangerous people. Which means you just made yourself a problem. Victor's heart stopped. I don't understand. I just deliver what she gives me. I don't know anything about. Doesn't matter what you know. The first man moved closer. What matters is you're here, holding an incomplete delivery, and we're the ones who have to explain to our buyers why the deal's gone sideways. You're the fall guy. Understand? She's making you take the heat. The realization hit Victor like a physical blow. Mary hadn't just sent him into danger. She'd sent him into a deliberate disaster. This delivery was never meant to succeed. He was meant to take the blame when it failed. Either the buyers would hurt him, or the police would find him, or something worse would happen. And Mary would be clean, untouchable, already planning her next move with her next victim. He'd been so stupid. So desperately, pathetically stupid. I need to leave, Victor said, backing toward the door. You're not going anywhere until this gets sorted. The first man reached for him. Victor ran. He bolted from the room, the package falling from his hands, his only thought to get out, get away, get to his car. Behind him, shouts. Footsteps pounding. He hit the stairs at full speed, nearly falling, catching himself on the railing. 2nd floor. 1st floor. The loading dock entrance ahead, that rectangle of slightly less darkness. He burst through the door into the freezing night air and ran straight into a human wall. Strong hands caught his shoulders, stopping him cold. Victor looked up into a face he didn't recognize, Asian features, cold eyes, wearing a suit that cost more than Victor's car. Behind him, more men, all of them still, all of them watching with the kind of professional calm that was somehow more terrifying than the chaos he'd just fled. "Victor Benson," the man said. It wasn't a question. "Please," Victor gasped. "I don't know what's going on. I just deliver packages. I'm just a waiter. Please don't hurt me." The man studied him for a long moment, then looked past him to where the two men from inside had appeared at the loading dock entrance. They stopped when they saw who was waiting outside. "This situation," the man said, still holding Victor's shoulders, "has become complicated. But you are not the complication. Come with me. Now." It was phrased like a request, but Victor heard the command underneath. More than that, he heard something else. Not a threat. An extraction. This man, whoever he was, wasn't going to hurt him. At least not right now. And right now was all Victor had the capacity to think about. He let himself be guided to a black sedan parked behind his own car. Let himself be placed in the back seat. Let the door close and the car pull away from the warehouse, from the disaster, from whatever Mary Dawson had intended to happen to him tonight. As the warehouse disappeared behind them, Victor started to shake. Not from cold. From the complete disintegration of the last thread of control he'd been clinging to. He'd run out of options. Run out of hope. Run out of everything except fear and exhaustion, and the dim awareness that his nightmare had just entered a new phase he couldn't begin to understand. The man in the front passenger seat made a phone call, speaking in Korean. Victor caught only one word he understood. Jean. Stay tuned for part 2, where Victor discovers who Jean Kim really is, and whether his rescue is genuine or just a transfer from one cage to another. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the conclusion of this story.